Alright, so it looks like we're good to start. So again, the second assignment here is going to be a title or logo sequence, and the requirements for the assignment will be about a 5-second long animation. Same resolution that we did last time, which was 960 by 540. That will actually pay attention to a little bit earlier on in the process than last time around. So just for the lecture, I'm going to briefly recap these couple examples. So for the title sequence, we want to recreate or create an original piece of a title sequence that shows off the text or the name of some sort of media or content that we like. So this Gotham example is for the Gotham show on TV, where we have this text that's animating in. Oops. Another example of that would be this show from Netflix called The Crown, where we're just seeing this text kind of moving backwards in space. The Gotham one was moving towards us, and it had a little bit of a bend to it. And for the people who aren't fans of TV or films, there are always the opportunity to do something like a sports team or a game logo. So some of these NBA examples are a little bit more extravagant than others, but a good one is this Cleveland Cavaliers one, where we could draw out the elements of this logo in Illustrator and bring that into Cinema 4D. And then again, the Memphis Grizzlies one, where we have this text that sort of moves in. Again, I know that those are super quick examples, and they might be hard to see on the screen share, so feel free to search up the name of any of these YouTube videos yourself if you're following along on your own. And then the last example, which is a little bit more clear to follow, is this EA Sports logo, where we have the white circle with the EA Sports logo on it, and then we have this silver ring that sort of animates around it. We can actually see a good shot of it right there, where the elements are separate and they sort of whoosh around quickly, sort of like a broadcast. So let's say we like one of these couple examples, or we know of something that we want to do specifically on our own. You're going to want to locate that animation on YouTube or some other video service, and then we're going to Google the website YouTube to MP4. And in the case of this Gotham one, I'm just going to copy this URL and then go to this website, and we're going to paste in this URL here. And some of these ads might be a little bit not too school friendly. Apologize for that. Usually we have ad block on machines. So format, we want an MP4. And the reason it's a good idea to do this is because you'll have a video file to pause and reference on your own. Oh boy, this is not, we're just gonna abandon that. So we're gonna go on to Google Images, and we're gonna type in Gotham title sequence. And we're going to try to grab a freeze frame. So again, our handy dandy YouTube tricks of enabling show sizes and size large to hopefully find the largest version of this image that we can. So this one looks pretty good. So we would want to grab this image, or if you're doing the video thing, you want to save that to a folder. So let's go through that process. So I've got my folder here on the P drive. I'm going to make a new folder called Assignment 2, and I'm going to make a new folder called Reference. And in here, I'm going to save this PNG. If you're doing something like a game logo, so let's look up like so you could do, you know, if you like, or no, you could draw out this Zelda title, or something like, you know, Mass Effect. If you like games or whatever, you know, feel free to grab whatever reference image you like, or reference video, save that to your folder, your reference folder on the P drive. So in the case of this Gotham one, let's just start working off that. So let's jump into Cinema. And what we're going to do is, so we're here in a new scene. Pretty much right off the bat, I'm going to click my middle mouse button and jump to my front camera down here in the bottom right. And for this, we're going to want to save, we're going to want to make our new folder. So in my assignment 2 folder, I'm going to make project files and call this my name. So in here, we're going to want to, now that we've got our file saved, we can jump to our front camera, and we're going to want to hit Shift V on our keyboard. That is V as in victory, and go to this this tab right here, which is called Back. And we're going to want to, in the image, we're going to want to load in that image that we saved. And this is going to be the image that we saved off of Google. So in this case, I'm going to pull up the Gotham title logo. And we can see here that I've got this logo now in my scene. So if you're doing something that is a movie or the name of something, like a traditional title sequence, you've got one potentially easier opportunity, and that is by using an object here in Cinema called the MoText object. And you can find that under the MoGraph menu up at the top here, and then MoText, because everything has a cool name. So we have this text object, and in here in the text box on this object, we can delete the pre-made word text and type in Gotham. In this case, I want to match, my text appears to be all capital letters, and then once you click off, you'll see that this will now say Gotham, and we can sort of try to line up what this is going to start looking like. Now, let me just scoot that up a little bit. So with this, call this Gotham text. There's not like a font size button. The font size is called height in this case. So I'm just going to pull down on this arrow until, basically what I did is on the left here, I lined up, using my move tool, I lined up the side of the G, and then I'm going to use my height tool over here to sort of line up this other side of the M. And again, I can always hold down Alt when I click this to get fine increments of decimal points. Now, sort of line up, scooch that up to line up the bottoms. You know, it doesn't need to be perfect, but we can easily recognize that, well, first off, there's something kind of weird in that the letters that I have here are way, way, way larger than the letters of my reference image. So actually what I should do is I should adjust this height value until the letters appear to be equal height or equal size. So I'm going to pull this down quite a lot. And now what I'm doing here is I'm sort of lining up the baseline of the text. Now, you know, I'm not going to go into like typography 101 over here, but, you know, using the vocabulary that hopefully we should remember, the baseline is the bottom of each of these letters. In this case, we don't have any text or any characters that have a descender, like a lowercase g or a j or something, you know, something that has like a hook that kind of curls along. In this case, we can just focus on our baselines and then match the tops of our letters using this height value. So the size of the letters looks to be pretty close. Obviously the font, the typeface itself is very different, but we can tell that these letters are not spaced out very well. And does anyone remember what the typography term for this is? Correct, yeah. Pretty much either of those answers, although tracking and kerning, you know, the dictionary definitions of them are going to be different. You could use either of them in this case. So we can use tracking in this case. Cinema 4D calls it horizontal spacing. And so we can raise this horizontal spacing value up. And now we're going to try to line up the left-hand side of the G and the right-hand side of the M using our horizontal spacing value. Now, this text, if I just uncheck this, so we can focus on our logo, there's a little bit of curvature and perspective to these letters, so it's going to be tricky to get this to match up, you know, exactly one for one. And part of that is going to be, you know, the creative liberty that we take in animating it is going to adjust and further sort of alter that. So I'm not expecting this to be, you know, a 99.99% accurate recreation. You know, this is just, you know, an exercise in using some new tools. And the reason I like to, or I encourage, recreating something is, you know, it can be daunting as a new artist in trying to make new artwork, one, with tools that you're unfamiliar with, and two, when you are still suffering or experiencing, you know, what's kind of could be called like writer's block or artist block. You know, you're sitting in front of, you know, a blank project file, and you might be overwhelmed and think, oh, I don't know what to make. So in this case, figuring out what we want to make by recreating something is getting us through half of the initial sort of hurdle. So now we just need to focus on what are the tools, what's the right tool or the right combination of tools to get the rest of this job done. So that little spiel out of the way, I'm going to turn this text back on, and the next, or probably the last thing that we need to really figure out here is our font is totally different. Now if I just...
Can you change the letters by, like, individually?
you mean like on a letter by letter per font?
Yeah.
You could. It would be a little bit trickier, but it's definitely doable. But just for the time being, I'm just going to focus on this one. Just going to focus on this one font. So, you know, you could try to figure out Gotham title sequence font. We can just take a stab at Googling what font this may or may not be. Nope. So, you know, we could just guess, or we can do the old Photoshop trick of clicking this font button and then just using our arrow key and just scrolling through all the options until we find something that sort of looks close. One thing I'm going to note is a little bit more of typography lingo is this font, you know, the actual Gotham font that's being used here is what is called a serif font. It has these little hanging bits that sort of decorate the sides of some of these letters, and the font that we have selected here is a sans serif font, which means that, you know, for example, this A doesn't have the little corner parts. So let's just scroll to the top of our font list and go through and see if we can find one that's similar. Now this looks pretty good, just as a complete guess. Adobe Arabic. Who would have guessed? But we can just go arrow down through the font list until we find something that we're happy with. Actually, a lot of these look pretty close enough to where, you know, for the purposes of a school assignment, I'm going to say a lot of these are actually pretty close. So, you know, if you can figure out something, if you can figure out the exact font by name via Google, awesome. You know, hats off to you. But I don't want to spend all day just going through these fonts, so I'm just going to find my way back up to Adobe Arabic and not italic. That is really small font. Cool. All right, so this seems to have adjusted the sizing of our letters a little bit, so I'm just going to kind of get these back into place, kind of. Now our height's way too small. And the tracking's all out of whack now, so just going to kind of give this the old close enough trademark. So, all right, with we're just going to call this close enough. So we've got this piece of text in, and in this case I'm actually going to middle align it. Oops. Let me just jump back real quick, kind of line that back up in the middle. Cool, good enough. So we've got this piece of text. A couple people in the first assignment, you might have asked me how to make a lamp, and in doing so you learned a tool ahead of time, and that is called the bend deformer. The reason the bend deformer is a pretty cool tool is, you know, in our reference image, if we just open this up, that way we can zoom in on it. We know in the video this text sort of curves a little bit. The sort of T and H in Gotham stick out a little bit closer to the camera than the M and the G. And so there's not a good way to, just using the coordinates and the tools built right into the text tool, there's not really a good way to sort of bend or shape this text. So we're going to use the bend deformer, and how we do that is clicking and holding on this button right here, the sort of purple bendy guy, which is the deformers menu, and we'll mouse over here to bend, and we're going to hold down Shift when we let go, and we'll see here that the bend deformer has been made. It's been created, and it's been created as a child of the Gotham text object. We don't want it to just be below here. We want it to actually be parented to. So to create this little curvature, if we were to look down, you know, we want the text to sort of sweep a little bit like this. We want to add it in our strength value, and a little bit will go a long way. But first we'll recognize, this is going to just goofy. The program has unfortunately sort of placed our bend deformer, it hasn't oriented it the way that we want it to. It's just, you know, not set up quite right yet. So we can grab our rotate tool, and what we want to do in this case is, I'm just going to pull this strength value up a lot just to illustrate this point. We can see the direction that this is curving is like this. Oops. So what we want to do is we want to line up this curve quite a lot differently. So we're going to rotate it. Once I pull this back down to something smaller. So we're going to rotate it. In my case, I want it to face down in 90 degrees like that, and then another rotate it 90 degrees like this. And the reason I want it to do this is because now, oops, I've got to, let's try, yeah. So once you've rotated it in those, at least in my case, in the two directions, what I did was to resize. We can see that this little purple line outline, this is the bend deformer itself. So think of it, you know, like when you're positioning a cube or something, it has, you know, a width, a height, the depth, rotation, etc. But it's got this cool button right here called Fit to Parent. And if we click that, it's going to kind of reorient and reposition itself to sort of wrap and kind of take on the outer shape of this Gotham text. Now we can see if we look down at this, the text is now sort of curving quite a bit more closely to what we want it to, which is cool. So if we jump to our front camera, we can see if I change the display to the top, or actually I'm going to do the second one, the line shading mode, we can see that the M, we're looking at the M straight on, but as we move over here to the left, these letters are getting more and more perspective. It's almost like instead of the bend deformer starting at the middle and working its way out, it's starting at one side and wrapping kind of all the way over to the side. So what I can just do is, instead of like positioning this and sort of fighting with wherever the bend shape is going to sort of do its thing, I'm just going to rotate the whole chunk. So I'm going to grab the Gotham text up here and just rotate it so that, in this case I'm rotating it along this green axis, the y-axis, and I'm going to rotate it just so that in the middle camera here, the perspective that we're looking at, the G and the M, sort of match each other a little bit. Basically, I just want to be looking kind of dead center down the middle of the T and the H, which is, in this case, our sort of center point. So a little bit will go a long way here, and that might be a little bit too far. I can always jump to my top camera, sort of line this up, and rotate this a little bit further. Now, one thing I want to sort of point out as a little sort of secret tip is, in this top camera, say I want to rotate this 0.2 of a degree. That might sound sort of tricky in our experience so far. You know, if I just grab this green axis handle and, you know, if I just sort of keep moving this around until I see the little number indicator there, say 0.2 degree, you might be sitting here all day long pulling your hair out until you get it just right. But oh, look at that, I got it. After a little bit of, you know, 30 seconds or so of messing with it, I eventually got it. But what I can do is I can actually just move with the left click still held down. I can move my mouse out further away, and now when I rotate this, it's a lot easier to get very fine increments of rotation. So I can nail in that 0.2 degrees, hopefully, quite a bit easier. So that's just a little trick. Might come in handy, might not. So if we jump back to YouTube and we just sort of reference the way that this font would move or animate, we're basically just moving our camera into these letters, and the curvature in this case is becoming more, it's curving stronger as this animates on. So if we just set up like 150 frame camera move, or we might not even do the camera, we can just grab our text, and this will be the super quick version of how to animate this. Just because I want to go through two examples today. We want to figure out, in this case, the z-axis is the direction that we're going to want to move it, because we kind of want to move it, you know, back to front. We can set our first key at Z position 0, and then at the end we can set another key and move it so that the text is going to go eventually towards the camera. So as we play this, we can see this text is now, you know, if we have our camera sort of over here positioned, we'll see, hey, you know, it's already kind of looking pretty close. Now additionally, we can set our bend deformer because we want to mimic the fact that this curvature increases over time. It almost starts, you could maybe even make the argument that it's completely straight on at the start, and then by the end it has a pretty significant amount of bend to it. You can really see the perspective on the top and baseline of this text. You know, the slant that this T is on and the slant that this H is on, you know, these are getting pretty extreme. We can always animate our bend deformer. Now, so let's say at the beginning here we have a strength of only like 5, and then at the end we'll have a strength of, it was at 23, let's just say 40. So that way we've got a lot of curvature. Now we can just note that, just like that little trick that we did where we were rotating our object, we've just got to do a little bit more, because we can see, you know, sort of this perspective of this text isn't really, you know, we can see here it's sort of all diagonal now. So let's just adjust that so that in our top camera this looks a bit straighter. So, you know, this will be my start rotation, this will be my ending rotation, and so again I'm just trying to kind of line up overall how curved this looks. So now if I make a camera and I go into my camera, again by enabling it, the little white check mark here. So if I position my start camera, so let's just set a keyframe here. So just like when we were keyframing the camera for the desk assignment, we want to keyframe our positions and our rotations. So we want to do all those at frame 0, and then here at frame 150. We can sort of, in our YouTube video, we recognize that we fly in between the T and the H. So let's sort of aim our camera right down the middle here. So at frame 150, we'll keyframe all of the camera position values and all of the rotation values. And let's just see what it's sort of a rough idea of what this looks like. So cool. The text is pretty close. Now at this point, obviously there's a lot of lighting and material work, which is going to go into making this sort of look like stone or some sort of concrete. And we've got this sort of moody lighting with a little bit of a red light underneath and a white light that sort of shines across in the YouTube video. See, we've got a white sort of highlight, and we've got these sort of red and blue lights that are reminiscent of like police lights. But for the most part, you know, the animation of the text is here. So, you know, pretty simple setup, just a camera, the text object, and in this case a bend deformer. We'll go over a couple other possible ways for other examples. So I'll just save this real quick. Now I know the text or title isn't going to apply to everyone, so I'll just do a second example that fits the sort of EA Sports style logo here. So this would be something that you would want to you know, find on Illustrator or find on Google, and that you would draw. You know, it could be any game, or you know, it could be a movie or a TV show, whatever. So to recreate, let me do the EA Sports logo. So this will be good enough. So let me view this image, save it. So I'm going to save it into my assignment 2 reference folder. So this will be EA Sports. And I'm going to open up Illustrator. So I'm just going to type in Illustrator. And we'll wait however long it takes to open up this. So just for the purpose of this assignment, I'm going to kind of divide these into two styles, like a title or text or a logo. Now obviously your logo can have text involved in it because obviously my EA Sports logo has words and text on it, but the logo style example is what we're going to be using Illustrator for. So just that way we've got clear language to differentiate the two. The logo route has a little bit more work up front because you can't just simply use the text tool in this case to make an exact replica of something like this EA Sports logo. You're never going to find this font, or I mean, EA is so prevalent online. Maybe you could find this font, but it would be pretty tricky to recreate this in Cinema. But in Illustrator, it's going to be pretty straightforward. So we'll just make a new document. Close that. Okay, this is different. Cool. So good old Adobe changes everything every year. I'm going to make my document 1000 by 1000 and click create. And hey, it worked. Okay. So I want to find my layers, pull my layers up here. So I want to load in my reference image. Now I'm just going to call this ref image. And you can probably just drag it in, but I'm going to go old school and do file place. Cool story. So this I'm going to just drag to the center. Now I can lock that and make a new layer, and I'm going to call this outer circle. And I can just use my M tool to switch, or ellipse, L. So just from the center, hopefully I can draw a circle. Now I'm not going to go over all of our Illustrator tools because hopefully if you're in this class you've done a course in Illustrator before. So I'm just going to work my way kind of quickly through this. Now in this case I do not want any fill or stroke color, so I'm going to X out both of these, and I just want to match the outer shape of my circle. So I'm going to shrink that down and shrink this side up. So in this case, that's something else. So we've got our outer circle, call this outer circle, and then I can just Control C to copy, Control F to paste in front. And what I want to make, basically for this first step, I'm going to try to make this silver circle. So in this one, I want to shrink this down a little bit, and that should be close enough. So this will be inner circle. So if I hide my reference image, and we turn both of these onto, if we turn our fill color on and just sort of make this a gray, which will be sort of close-ish. Again, the colors of anything in this Illustrator document are not at all relevant to Cinema. It's just the paths and the shapes that we're drawing, but just for you, for your own sake, as you're recreating this, you can use the fill and stroke colors, but just keep in mind that once we translate that into Cinema 4D, that data is not going to come with it. So to make this outer ring, what we have to do is use the Pathfinder tool. So we're going to go to Window and hopefully find Pathfinder. And I believe I want to use this one, which is called minus front. With these both selected, hopefully it should do that. So I've got my outer silver ring. So I can turn that layer off. And actually, before I do that, I'm going to undo, because I want to make another layer, call this white circle. And I'm going to copy, because I've already drawn this circle right here, I'm going to copy, Control C, select this layer, Control F to paste, or not. I'll just drag the little box to that layer, turn that off. So now, okay, now again, we'll select those two and use the minus front button in Pathfinder to knock out that shape. So that's our outer gray circle. And then we turn that off and then turn this one on, and this will be our inner white circle. And we can fill this with a white color. Oop, we should have it selected when we go to change the color. So now we can go into making the EA portion of this logo, and we're just going to use the pen tool. So with this layer selected, we're going to hit P on our keyboard. So I'm just going to use the pen tool to click through and create this shape. If you need a refresher on the pen tool, feel free to let me know. I can point you to a tutorial that'll give you a little bit more in-depth walkthrough on how to use this, but like I said, hopefully we should all be masters of the pen tool by now. So I'm going to change this fill color to a red, just for fun. And we're going to go through and just trace this shape. If none of this is relevant to you for your assignment, feel free to skip past this portion of the video. I apologize, because watching somebody use the pen tool is always agony. Cool. So that's that. I'm not going to go through making sports. You can trace that out if it's relevant to you. Chances are nobody else here is going to be making the EA Sports logo, so I'm just going to shut up and move on. Cool. So let's just pretend that these three pieces, the gray ring, the white circle, and the red logo here, are our entire logo. Let's just pretend that for simplicity's sake. Now it does bother me that these 2 points are not the same height. Okay. So how do we save this and bring this into Cinema 4D? Well, that's a good question. First, we should save it, and we'll go to our project files, and we're going to call this EA Sports, or my name, EA Sports logo. So we want to save out the Illustrator file. Cool, awesome, you can click OK. And now we're going to do that again, so we're going to do File, Save As. Now this is super duper important if you're doing the Illustrator route. You want to save as again after you've already saved it as an Illustrator file. So we can see here we have our one, and it's a .ai file. What I want to do is underscore AI8. Now you don't have to name it exactly that, but you have to name it something different. So in this case I just do AI8 and then click Save here. And in this pop-up box, this is what's super important. You have to click this Illustrator CC, or if you have Illustrator CS6 at home, whatever. You want to change it from whatever format it was to this format right here, Illustrator 8. Don't ask me why. This tool was saved or created, I don't know, 20 years ago or something. Google whenever Illustrator version 8 came out. that's when this file was made, and this type of file is what the program wants. So if you try to save it as an Illustrator 9 or 10 or anything else, Cinema will not open it. You'll have a frowny face. You'll be frustrated, sad, depressed, whatever. But if you save it as an Illustrator 8, everything's going to work all cool. So you can click OK. Sure, blah, blah, blah. Cool. So we have, in our project files, we have two files here, the logo. And the reason I like to keep two versions, the original version, we can see that these file sizes are very different. And if you have a very complex logo that has lots of paths and lots of Pathfinder stuff, some of that might get lost if you save one version and all you save is the Illustrator 8 file. So have your main file and then the Illustrator 8 file as well, is my recommendation. So we can jump back to Cinema and make ourselves a new scene, or if you're starting scratch, cool. What we can do is now take this AI8 file and we can drag it into Cinema, or if you don't want to drag it, you can go to File Merge and then go find your file, but I'm just going to drag and drop. So in this drag and drop menu, in this case I can leave all this alone and it should work. And cool. So my logo's in here now. And you'll see that it came in only as one piece, which is sort of a bummer. So all that hard work that we did, layering and naming and all this, that's what I mean by the AI8 file kind of sucks because it's so old. But it's a weird quirk and it's what we have to work with. So what we can do is we can go to the coordinates and we can just put these back at 0 to get this back to the sort of center of our scene. And now we need to just break this up again real quick. And we can do that. Let's see if... Nope. There is one button, if I can find it, that will hopefully... Cool. So, alright. Alright, so what I just did was I went up to, with the original selected, I'm just going to undo that because I found the button. So I import my Illustrator 8 file and it's only one logo or one layer here. We can see that we're not able to select any of these individual pieces. We're going to be sad. But we can get around that by going up here, click Mesh, and then Spline, and then Explode Segments. And I believe you can just find this if you right-click, possibly, maybe not, nope. So Mesh, Spline, Explode Segments, and we'll see here that we now have a bunch of individual pieces, and we can sort through these. Unfortunately, none of them are named. But we can see this one here is a chunk of the EA. Here's another chunk of the EA. Here's one ring that might represent our white circle. Here's another ring and another ring that will represent our silver border. So let's just reconstruct this real quick. We have to think similarly to how we worked in Illustrator. What we can do is we can select, because we know this is EA logo 1, this is EA logo 2. So I can select those two and group them. And we can remember group objects is Alt-G from our hotkey sheet, and we can name this EA logo group. This one is going to be our white circle, and then these two, this will be silver ring 1, silver ring 2, and these ones can get grouped. So this will be silver ring outside. Now, just name stuff descriptively. It's on you so that you can navigate your project, and me, when I come by to help you. So we can see that these are just paths. So just like in Illustrator, we only have the path points. We don't have like actual geometry or like, stuff that we can look at. If we click our render button, we'll see nothing appears at all. What the heck? So what we have to do is we can extrude these objects. Now, just like when we were using the extrude tool, which was D on the keyboard or I on the keyboard, when working with cubes and cylinders and so on and so forth, there's an object called the extrude object. And you can find that under this little green cube object, which is called the subdivision surface. You want to click and hold, and you can find this extrude button. Now, when I create this, I want to make sure that I've got an object selected, in this case my EA logo group. So I'm going to go back there, and I'm going to hold Alt on my keyboard when I make this. And sweet. So, didn't work, but that's alright, I know why. The way the extrude object works is a little quirky. What we have to do is select this object now and go to this green menu, and we want to make a connect object, and this one we want to also hold down Alt. And so now we can actually see we have geometry here that shows our EA logo, and you replace this EA logo with anything that you've drawn. So again, the hierarchy here is we have our spline objects, and each of these is grouped into a group, and then the group is part of the connect object, and then the connect object is part of the extrude. So I know that might seem a little bit complicated, but just think of it as each piece is feeding into the next piece, and it'll be pretty straightforward. So we can just make a red material real quick, and we'll just super quick recreate our EA logo. So this is going to be called EA logo extrude. And then this white circle, again, we'll do the same thing. This time we can skip the group. So we can go to the connect object, again hold down Alt, and then now with the connect object selected, we can make the extrude. So hold down Alt here. And so now we can see if we make a white material and apply this to this, we'll call this white circle. We can see something sort of funky happening with our camera here, and that is because each of these objects is occupying the exact same space. So just like when we were working with the desk scene, if you tried to create like your cupboard or something, or a drawer inside your desk, if stuff was positioned too close, it kind of freaks out. All we have to do is grab this white circle, and in this case we're going to pull it backwards in the Z axis. So this way it looks like the EA logo is actually lifted off the surface of our white circle here, which if we check our video, we can see this EA logo is actually extruded away, sort of off the face of this white circle. So that looks cool. And lastly, we can just finish this off with the silver ring. Again, this process, you want to select your group and then click and hold to make the connect object, holding down Alt. And then with the connect object selected, click and hold and make the extrude object, again holding Alt. And so now we have our ring. So this one will make just a gray color. We'll make it look like metal later, but apply that to that. And look at that, we've got ourselves our logo. I think that's a good place to wrap. We'll figure the rest of the day will be just work time on getting your other assignment turned in, starting this assignment, so on and so forth. I do want to save this project though, So I'm going to save this Cinema 4D file, and this will be my name. And cool. So I'm going to end the recording here.